Day one. In walked a crew of seemingly tough Brooklyn high school kids. After a few weeks of getting to know each other, I sat them down to talk about the original play we were going to make together. They said that they wanted to make their play about gang violence and police brutality. I took a deep breath. After a few days of exploring the material, the room got pretty heavy, so I sat them down just to see how they were feeling, and one of my quietest students stood up and he said, "I was thinking that we could do it like an old Western where the cops would be sheriffs and the gangs would be cowboys and the townspeople would get lost in between." And it was a brilliant idea. All of a sudden, we had this great way to creatively explore the themes and issues in these kids' world with a bit of safe distance. And after a few months, they had a fantastic play called Sweet Lily, Wyoming, and the Shadow of the Cowgirls. And they were able to tell their community what kind of world they lived in, and also figure out ways to articulate what kind of world that they wished for. Fast forward, it's the 2009 Homeless World Cup in Milan, Italy. The Homeless World Cup is essentially like the World Cup, but for homeless soccer teams from all over the world, and there were 56 countries represented there. And I was working on a documentary with the South African team, and the days in Milan had taken a few sour turns, and the players were a bit down, which had led to some losses on the pitch. And I was supposed to interview one of the players, Ephraim, who is usually all smiles and just a bundle of joy, but today he came in just really agitated, and when he sat down, he said, "I'm not sure I'm in the mood for this today." So I asked him just a few gentle questions, and he began to monologue about his life story, what kind of background he had, his drug abuse problem that had estranged him from his family, but how he was clean now and wanted to reconnect with them and ultimately start a family of his own. And he started making plans about what needed to happen when he returned to South Africa. And at the end of the interview, his smiles had returned, and he said to me, "Thanks for listening. This was like therapy for me." And there's Ephraim. For young people who are still developing their voices and their sense of self, storytelling is a really powerful way for them to articulate what they're going through, and to know that they have an audience to share it for just raises the stakes and helps them to realize that their voice is worth something. A few friends of mine do all kinds of creative work with students that I find to be really inspiring. One of my friends, she takes kids out into their local neighborhoods in New York with just a handheld video camera and has them interview members of their community and start making work about the communities that they come from. Another one of my friends, she makes these really hip zines with her students, and she has them write poetry and lyrics, and she really publishes their book with their animations, and it's just great to have students find ways to express their stories to the world around them. But the last story that I would like to share is actually about my grandfather. My grandfather was a proud man. He had been supporting his family since he was 14 years old. He had brought 3 successful children up in the world, and he'd brought his family to America, fleeing war. But my grandfather, he now takes a handful of pills every morning and every evening. He has to inject himself with insulin every night. He limps, and due to his physical state, he often gets lost inside of himself somewhere. A few years ago, I saw him sitting alone on the sofa watching TV after everyone else had gone to bed. And I went and I sat down next to him, and he was watching a Discovery Channel episode on sheep. And he began to tell me how he had raised sheep as a child in Lebanon, and then spent the next 2 hours telling me stories of his life, how he had fled war with his family, how he had lived apart from his children and his wife for a year, an entire year, how he had lived throughout Africa and the Middle East, and all these adventures that he'd been on in the meantime. And afterwards, he said, "That was my life story. Thank you for listening. I never thought I'd tell it to anyone," which blew my mind, having a story like that. But I think, whether it's through devised theater, through documentary film, or through sitting with someone on a couch, the real power in all of these stories is in storytelling. I think in all of these experiences, these storytellers were, for the first time, given an audience to tell their stories to, who was actively listening to them. And I think at the end of the day, we simply all want to know that we're worth listening to. On that note, I'd like to invite you all tonight to a preview screening of Street Ball, the documentary that I mentioned. You will be the hip in crowd. It's not going to be up for release until 2010, but we'd love to have you come and screen the first 20 minutes of the film. And it's still in its editing form. We're getting close to being done, but we'd love to hear your feedback in the meantime. So tonight, 7:30 and 9:30, we'd love to have you come join us. The director, Demetrius Wren, is here, and he's going to be conducting that. But finally, I'd just like to invite you in your downtime in the lobby as we're hanging out over dinner, ask a few people their stories. I'm pretty sure you're going to hear some great ones. Thank you.